What is the statistics that is involved in spreading of the risk? What is this risk avoidance altogether? Prevention is always better than cure. This might be due to the ignorance or by choice, particularly when the risk is so remote. Good morning and welcome to the session 5 in unit 4 of Principles and Practice of General Insurance, where we are going to speak about the statistics spreading of risk. Now let's just try to understand what is the risk factor and what is the statistics that is involved in spreading of the risk. Now, risk refers to the probable disadvantageous, undesirable, unprofitable outcome of a fortuitous event, an event which is not desired but nevertheless taking place. Now, risk has a very, very beautiful definition and a concept to understand. Why is that? If you look into the risk factors, many a times you will be surprised with this factor that people have taken risk as a common factor rather than trying to avoid risk. They try to take the risk and they try to move with the risk factor. Now, for example, let us say, what is the risk that is involved in traveling in a train or in a plane or by road? There is some risk that is involved. But for that sake, people don't stop traveling. They say that, yes, that's a part and parcel of the life and we have to keep moving, and hence we keep moving forward. Sometime down the lane, you would start asking this question that, can we completely avoid risk? Can risk be completely taken off? Can there be a business in this world which can be of a zero risk nature process altogether? And the answer to that is a complete no. Why? Because risk is something, as it has been written, it's a probability of something negative or unadvantageous, or let's talk about something which was not desired at all that happened. But then risk is something that we cannot avoid. We have to take it, and then only we will be able to achieve that particular act or that particular objective. Now, for example, let's look into the circus itself. In the circus, when the acrobats jump from one point to another point, there is definitely a risk involved in terms of their physical life. But then they take that risk, then only they will be able to perform the act. So risk is something that is inbuilt in each and every activity. Now, even if you are going to sit simply in a place, you cannot say that you are completely devoid of risk. There is a risk factor even of sitting simply in a place, because you never know what is going to happen onto your body. So risk is always there, and it needs to be overcome in such a manner that we can at least try to avoid risk to a certain extent, but we cannot make it 100% risk-free at all. Now, that's why the risk avoidance is more important rather than the risk-taking factor. What is this risk avoidance altogether? This involves the selection of those business activities which only involve the minimum amount of risk. Now, there was a time in our country when people used to say this factor, what is the easiest way of getting a secure job? The answer to that was a government job. The reason being is that the risk of losing the job was less, because it's more of a secured job, a secured condition altogether. Which means to say that the risk involved in terms of your performance or your promotion, all those things was not much there, and people could just sail through that job. Similarly, when I talk about the risk avoidance, it's basically trying to find out an avenue or a methodology or a process or a business where you would see that the risk is the minimum. It does not involve too much of risk. You are not dependent on too many factors to happen. Now, for example, buying a property or business in order to take on the liability that comes with it, not flying in order to take the risk that the airplane was to be hijacked, or not to visit border areas at the time of war tensions, or avoid manufacturing of a product in which the patent or copyright is doubtful. Now look at all these kind of examples, quite simple and quite easy for us to understand. Why? Because we know the inherent risk. Now nobody wants to go and build a house right at the border of two countries which are already in tension, already in war, and then you come back and claim an insurance saying that my house was hit by a shell or by a missile attack. Now nobody wants to do that. Similarly, nobody wants to manufacture a product or manufacture a particular kind of an item where it will lead themselves into controversy or into a question mark. Or nobody wants to buy a property which is already in litigation. Why do we do all these activities? That we are very careful in thinking about the factor. Let's avoid risk. Let's not take risk with us and start growing, but let's avoid risk altogether so that at least we are able to take care of our positions well. So we do not believe in a risk-taking activity. Rather, we believe in risk avoidance altogether. Avoid risk as far as possible. That is far better. That is even more impressive, and that will actually help the insurance company also to give a clear-cut insurance for you. Now, the second thing is that how is the risk factor that we are going to talk about in terms of the prevention altogether. This can be done by eliminating the cause of loss and protecting the loss of things or persons exposed to damage or during the loss situation or condition. So I am talking about prevention. We all know about the famous saying altogether, saying that prevention is any day better than cure. So the famous saying goes like this: prevention is always better than cure. The similar thing is here, risk prevention. Prevent the risk altogether rather than protecting the risk. Prevent it. Even before that risk can approach you and you get into trouble, let's try to prevent the risk. Let me just give you a very simple example. When you buy a new bike, it is quite inherent and it's quite obvious that you will try to raise the accelerator and try to drive the bike at 120, 140 or even at 180 kilometers. Now, unfortunately, if you land up in an accident because of doing that, or that leads you to a damage of life, a loss of life altogether, then nobody is to be blamed. No insurance company is going to come and pacify you or your family members saying that what he did was right. Rather than taking the risk of driving the bike above the speed limits that is being prescribed, please don't drive the bike. Please drive the bike well within the limits of the speed. In that case, you will be protective about yourself and your family can also be protective. The insurance company will also be able to understand the nature. So that is why we say that prevent the risk factors. Don't try to approach the risk. Don't try to take the risk too much, or don't try to land up by challenging yourself that whatever happens, let it happen. I will challenge it. I will take it further. So that is why we say that this can be done by eliminating the cause of loss. I want to eliminate. I want to remove it, discard it completely, protect the loss of things or persons exposed to damage or injury. There can be a position where we will get into damage, where we can get into an injury situation, and minimize it as far as possible. Let's minimize the situation. Let's not try to maximize or challenge ourselves. Now, the next thing is that the risk assessment that we are going to talk, and the assumption factors also. Now, this refers to an individual or the firm assuming the risk itself and bearing the insuring factor of uncertainty. This is known as self-insurance. This might be due to the ignorance or by choice, particularly when the risk is so remote, or that any step can be taken to minimize or eliminate it, would be considered even an uneconomical exercise. Now, what is assumption all about? In risk, we assume that these are the things that can probably happen, and this is something like a self-assessment by ourselves. We believe that this kind of risk can happen. We believe that this kind of risk can again fall upon us, or we believe that risk is going to come as a definite factor on all of us. But then in the long run, let's try to understand this factor clearly, that more and more we assume things, more and more we try to build in things by ourselves, it is leading us into trouble. It is leading us into a position where we are completely unavoidable. We get completely hit by that factor. So that is where I would say that it is very, very important for all of us to minimize it. Let us reduce the assumptions as far as possible. Let's not take too many assumptions. Let's not believe that the risk is going to be of this nature or this particular kind, but let's try to go by the actual factors. We do self-evaluation, it is good, but then we cannot just get carried away by that self-evaluation. We need to put it in practice. We need to see what is the practical idea out of it. So let's not take too much of assumptions regarding the risk. Now, the next thing is the risk coming into the factor from a distribution. This means that the spreading of risk by the means of group, sharing, partnership, or company form of business organization. So that is why we say that the loss of few people is shared by many people in insurance. That is where insurance comes into picture. So we spread the loss, we spread the risk so that it is covered by so many people. And when the risk is being spread across in terms statistically, then automatically the occurrence chances are very low. What do I mean by saying this is that in a road, for example, there is a possibility that out of the 1,000 vehicles that they are passing through, probably a 5 or 10 vehicles might get into accident. But it is not possible that all the 1,000 vehicles will go through accident. That's exactly what we mean by saying that trying to avoid the risk factor. We are spreading the risk. Now, when we say that, we are trying to eliminate the fear factor out of the mind of people so that the risk is evenly spread across at different segments, at different sectors altogether. Next, the hedging and neutralization. This is a very, very important concept. What do we try to do here is that this involves offsetting loss from the occurrence of risk by a compensating gain from another activity. So instead of doing this particular activity, if I'm going to select something else, this will hedge off the risk, this will compensate the risk and put me back to the normal condition or to a better condition. Now let me just give you an example here. Instead of putting all the money in equities or in shares, if I try to invest some of it in mutual fund, some of it in gold, or some of it in real estate, then automatically I'm spreading the risk into different things. I'm hedging off, trade-off between the different choices and options so that I'll be able to neutralize myself from the upcoming risk that is coming into the picture. So this is how we try to talk about hedging and neutralization in insurance. The next thing is that elimination of risk. As far as possible, we believe that risk has to be eliminated. We don't want risk to come into picture at all. So that's why it is illogical to spread risk can be eliminated, and much efforts are usually taken by the business community to improve their equipment, the methods that are unnecessary element of risk can be avoided. Now, for example, any business, when they are trying to run their operations, they will try to find methods through which they can become as close to 100% success. Now, there is a possibility of 1% that there is a failure, or there might be some risk, there might be some causes, there might be some unforeseen situation hitting up altogether, but then that is not a matter of worry at all. What we are trying to see here, what we are trying to believe ourselves is that we want to see a complete transformation, a complete ideology where we can eliminate the risk and where we can get the best things in place altogether. So that is why we believe that elimination of risk is highly needed here. The next thing is risk transfer. Can the risk be transferred? This means that one person guaranteeing other against the risk. So anything happens, I'm ready to back you out. I'm ready to give you that insurance factor, the backup saying that nothing is going to happen. I can transfer the risk. I can mitigate the risk for you. So even in case if there is going to be a loss, there is going to be some sort of a danger, there is going to be some sort of a challenge coming in, somebody is saying that I am there at the back of you. I will save you, I will protect you, and I will take care of you. So that's where risk gets mitigated, it gets transferred altogether. And that is very, very important for all of us. Why? Because when the risk is being transferable, risk is being taken care by somebody else altogether, then we don't have to worry about it. We can see a complete success here coming up. That means you can have a better assurance, you can have a better comfortability level in saying that risk will not come and affect your business. Now, with this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that this session was of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we are going to talk about the premium rating, premium loading, and other factors about premium. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.